Greetings and salutations, fellow geekers. Thanks so much for joining me today. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Feel free to comment down below. Now let's get into it.
All of this ending now more than 2 months of searching for the 15-year-old Morgan Hill girl. There are many unanswered questions tonight, but this is the scene after authorities from the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department made an arrest tonight in the disappearance of 15-year-old Sierra Lamar of Morgan Hill.
This is the tragic story of the beautiful 15-year-old Sierra Lamar that went missing on March 16th in 2012. She was born on October 19th, 1996, but let's start from the very beginning. In this picture, it's her dad Steve Lamar, her mom Marlene Lamar, and her older sister Danielle that's 6 years older. This story takes place in Morgan Hill, but most of her life she actually lived in Fremont, and that's in the San Francisco Bay Area if you're not familiar with it. Her friends and family would describe her as bubbly, nice, fun, just someone who you'd always want around. And one of her favorite things to do as a teenager would be lip syncing to rap songs, and I thought that was really cute. Okay, let's jump forward to September of 2009. Sierra's father, Steve, had pled guilty to a single charge of committing lewd acts with a child younger than 14 years old. He was sentenced to a year in jail and is now a registered sex offender. For what I know, he would molest Sierra's friends when they would come over to visit, and he said he never molested Sierra, but this is what prompted the divorce for Marlene and him. Marlene divorced Steve shortly after that, and that's when they decided to move to Morgan Hill. Now, she got into a new relationship, got remarried, and decided to move the hour trip down south. Now, this hits close to home for me because I actually used to live in Morgan Hill at the time of her disappearance. So I lived with my little dog, Brody, and we would go hiking in the backyard. Our backyard was actually El Toro, the largest hilltop in Morgan Hill. Now that was my backyard. We lived off of 40 acres. These are some pictures of mine that I've taken on our hikes, and you can see how beautiful it was. I just loved the country. I would even hang my clothes out to dry on some days, as you can see, and it was absolutely beautiful. I do remember seeing her posters around town and things happening. I honestly was just so indulged in my schoolwork in college, also working at the time. I wish I did more back then, but as my first YouTube video, I figured, why not cover Sierra? Because I just really wanted to help get her name out there, and for a small town like Morgan Hill, it roughly hits maybe 42,000 people, so I figured get her name out there and give her a voice. Okay, so now back to her story. Sierra moved down south to Morgan Hill with her mother, and she was in the middle of high school, so she ended up going to Ann Sobrato High School. It wasn't too hard to make friends because she was funny and pretty. At her high school in Fremont, she was on the Huskies cheerleading team, but for what I understand, she was also one at the Ann Sobrato. Every school day, Sierra had a typical schedule. Her mom would knock on her door, come in, wake her up before she left for work, and make sure she was getting ready for school. But on March 16th, she was already up.
Morning, it was pretty much a routine. I would get ready for work, and before leaving, I would say goodbye to Sierra.
This would be the last known image of Sierra Lamar alive, a selfie she took right before she left her house that morning. Right before she left her house at 7:11 a.m., she had texted her friend to meet her up at school to go over homework together. This would be the last time she ever left her house. Sierra was the only person for her bus stop, so she would walk roughly just maybe not even a quarter to half a mile down the road, and right after 7 o'clock to have the bus pick her up by 7:25. This video here is interesting because it gives you a glimpse of her view every day she would walk. That was her house. And every time she would leave, she would make a left onto Paquita Espana Court. As you can see, it's a really pretty little street, very country, quiet. Then at the end, she would make a left-hand turn onto Doherty Avenue. That hilltop on the right, that's actually El Toro, where I used to live. Now, her bus stop was right here. It wasn't a very far walk, but she did walk alone. And if you just go a little further, you can see that there's a stop sign, and that would be the intersection of Palm and Doherty. Typically, Marlene would call Sierra after she was done with school to see how she was, how her day went, but Sierra never answered, and she called a few times. She never picked up. She figured maybe she went home and she just took a nap and that she would see her later. However, when Marlene got home from work that day, she checked Sierra's room and she wasn't there, and she wasn't anywhere in the house. So she called the school and Serato to see if maybe she stayed later that day, but unfortunately they advised her that she was absent from all of her classes. Now, this isn't like Sierra, so she called her ex-husband Steve to see if maybe she went up north for the day and he had her, and he said unfortunately no, he hasn't seen her since the weekend before. Now panic mode starts, so she starts texting all of Sierra's friends that she knows about and seeing if they heard from her that day, and nobody had. Okay, 2.0 mom kicks in and she decides to call the sheriff's department and let them know. And they kind of patronized her, to say the least. They said, oh, she's just a teenager, she'll probably just come back. And, she was kind of thinking she was just going to be mad at her for never showing up and not answering her calls, but Sierra never showed up. That was one of the longest nights for them, and the next morning she was officially declared missing.
Search teams have been probing the creeks and fields near the Lamar home and scanning for clues from above.
Late nights, been on long flights, stayed on strange time. It's a strange time in my life. I took a drive home to clear my mind, and I ended back at your spot for what felt like the millionth time. Reconnection from separate sections, cause we could meet in the middle with no sense of direction. If it's sun up to sundown, we mess around, we're way too involved now. I never wanted someone to disappear, to just get out of here. I never wanted someone to take control. I let you take control, I let you in too close. So baby, just go ghost. Now baby, just go ghost. Hey.
Even though the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department waited a day to report Sarah missing, I was impressed to see how fast they picked up all the pieces, gathered search and rescue teams, had so many volunteers just pitch in for her search. Now, they went through all of the sex offenders in the area, and they ruled them all out because they all had solid alibis. Now, Steve, Sierra's dad, was very transparent and forthcoming about him being on the list of sex offenders, and with that said, he was not allowed to participate in any of the searches, unfortunately. Later on, John Walsh from America's Most Wanted actually interviewed Steve, and I liked that. I thought that was nice because it gave him an opportunity to be a voice for his daughter. Then investigators went ahead and checked the bus footage since there's a camera on it, and they see the bus going down the street, but it didn't even stop because Sierra wasn't even there. Investigators then went ahead and used cadaver dogs to see where her scent may have gone to. Now, it stopped right in the middle of a road, so they believe that she got into a car. The question is, was it willingly or not willingly? Later that day, they got the first big break in her case. They found her black Galaxy Samsung phone in the middle of a field about 2 miles, not even, maybe a mile and a half from her house. And they believe someone had thrown it from their car into the field. Here's a snapshot on my maps that I took. The red dot is, of course, where Sierra lived, and the circled area is the field that the phone was found. Now here's an aerial view to better describe where the phone was found compared to the mom's home, Sarah's house. And it was interesting because the phone was turned off, but because it had rained previously before, it was causing water to get in the charging port, which made it think it was charging, so it turned off and on, off and on. And I thought that was so interesting because I've never heard of that before, but I'm so glad it worked for Sierra's case. They went ahead and sent Sierra's phone to the Santa Clara County Crime Lab. The next day, on Sunday the 18th, another huge break in the case came out. So around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they found Sierra's Juicy Couture bag that was black and pink outside an abandoned shack. Now, this abandoned shack was about 2 miles north from Sierra's house, and on the side of the shack was a bunch of cactus, and that's where the bag had been thrown. Here's an aerial view as the same before, but it's also showing where the bag was found. Now, in the bag was all of Sierra's belongings that were identified by her family, and that included her gray shoes, jeans, bra, underwear, makeup, book bag, and even her $5 bill that her mom gave her for lunch. Now, remember that selfie Sierra took right before she left her house that day? Well, the San Jose Sharks hockey team sweatshirt was also in that bag. They went ahead and took the bag to the Santa Clara County Crime Lab to be processed. Shortly after that, they ended up finding DNA on her bag and jeans, but they didn't know who it was, so they went ahead and submitted it to the CODIS system. For anyone that's not familiar with this, it is an acronym that stands for Combined DNA Index System that the FBI uses to match convicted felons and evidentiary samples from unsolved cases. 3 weeks go by and they finally have a match. That person is 21-year-old Antolin Garcia Torres, who lived in San Martin, which is about 7 miles south from Sierra's house. Who is this person, you ask? Well, he's no saint, he is no stranger to law enforcement, and he has a long rap sheet. It all started back in May 2009 when he was 18 years old. He was living in a house with other people. Well, one day the police came by to serve a warrant for one of the people who lived there, and he started acting out pretty bad. He was causing a scene, cussing at the police, calling them pigs. Well, he's not the sharpest crayon in the box because he thought that would make the police go away. Instead, they ended up taking down the door and arresting his ass too. Now, instead of being a compliant criminal, he also caused a scene in his cell by clogging the toilet with TP, then vandalizing his walls with carvings that said, quote unquote, "I seen it." Now, I don't know what he saw then, but I know he saw later that he got 2 more misdemeanor charges, which were obstruction by a police officer and vandalism. Now, instead of getting an attorney or even a public attorney, he decided to represent himself, and then he was found guilty. No surprise there. And he served a whopping 5 days in jail. Okay, let's fast forward to 2010. So his mom rents out a property to his sister and her man friend. They couldn't exactly pay rent, but his mom was lenient with time to find another living arrangement before she took them to court. Okay, for whatever reason, Antolin had his bossy pants on that day and decided to show up at the house. He then demanded that they leave in the next 2 hours. And you know how confrontations go, they typically end up in an argument. Since now his genius plan isn't working out, he then goes upstairs, rips the AC unit out of the wall, and throws it out the window. Because, you know, that would make everyone listen to him. That prompted the man friend to actually start fighting with Antolin, and I'm talking about a physical one. Well, the man friend did not win, and Antolin beat him so bad that he ended up in the hospital. Oh, look, it's that picture again. What do you know? He's arrested. He told police it was justified because he had a baby on the way and didn't want any tweakers around. He was arrested and had a bond of $25,000. And Father of the Year goes to... Just kidding. So, speaking of pregnancy. While all of this is going down, Antolin is also pounded with another criminal charge, sexual intercourse with a minor. So his high school sweetheart, his current girlfriend, Frances, got pregnant when she was 16 and he was 20. Now, that was one of the most important things for Sierra's case, because if he was never charged as a sex offender and his DNA put in the CODIS system, we might have never found him. His girlfriend Frances ended up having 2 kids with him and eventually became his wife. She ended up dropping the unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor, but his DNA will always be in CODIS and pretty much always labeled as a sex offender. Antolin had to take a 16-week parenting class and a 16-week anger management class for the assault and battery for his sister's man-friend altercation. Okay, so now you know a little bit about Sierra's perpetrator and some of his criminal background. I say some because you'll hear more about him later. Police wanted to build a stronger case against Antolin, even though they had his DNA. They went full-blown Inspector Gadget on his ass. They tapped his phone, put a GPS on his car. But wait, my favorite part is when they played Mr. and Mrs. Smith, rented out the house across the street from him directly, just so they could surveil him 24/7. Now that's awesome. At this point, they just really wanted to see if Antolin would mess up and slip up and take them to where Sierra was. They figured maybe hopefully she was still alive somewhere. Now, investigators actually talked to Antolin one day. They were canvassing his area. Well, they specifically asked him 2 questions. They asked him if he knew Sierra Lamar or if he's even seen her. Now, Antolin replied he didn't know of her and he's never heard of her before until he saw her pictures posted everywhere around town. He didn't seem nervous and was cool as a cucumber, according to those who interviewed him. He didn't even hesitate to answer any of the questions as if he knew one day they would be asked. Then they asked him what his alibi was the day that Sierra went missing. He said he left his house between 7 and 7:20 in the morning to go fishing alone. And after a day of fishing, he then went to Bank of America to cash his check. Now, this next question they asked him is very intentional. They asked him if anyone would say that he knew Sierra or have had any relationship with her. He chuckled and said, "I doubt it. Why?" Then they asked if there would be any reason his DNA would be in any connection with Sierra. He seemed embarrassed, but he then proceeds to confess to them that he has a problem with masturbating in his car, and he would use tissues to clean it up and throw that out the window. He then insinuated that he might have thrown tissues out where some of Sierra's things were found. Okay, Mr. I like to throw things out the window. They're not buying it. But they did like to hear him trying to make sense of everything, even when they didn't even mention what kind of DNA it was. He went straight to talking about semen. Plus, they didn't even say that they did find any DNA, but he still tried to explain himself why there would be any. Okay, back to his alibi. There was a camera where Antolin lived in the Maple Leaf RV park that was at the entrance and exit. It showed him truly leaving, like he said, around 7 a.m. They also checked the bank and saw he really did go cash his check a little bit before 1 p.m. But they noticed his clothes. Around the ankles of his jeans, they were a bit discolored and as if they were wet. However, the footage was in black and white, so it was hard to tell for sure. Now, with all of this information gathered from his alibi, they truly believe that Antolin was around some type of body of water, whether he was fishing or not. So investigators decided to send out search and rescue teams to all of the surrounding areas, and given there are hundreds, over 200 bodies of water just in Santa Clara County alone. Now, there are 10 large reservoirs in Morgan Hill alone. They did search day and night for Sierra, but unfortunately, nothing came up. Okay, now we were on April 7th, and investigators were able to serve a search warrant for his car based on the claiming evidence of DNA matching his. So they took his red Jetta to the crime lab for processing. What they found would pretty much seal this case against him. Sierra's DNA was found on the rear door handle, Her hair was also found in some rope that was in his trunk, and her DNA was on some gloves found in his car. Even with all of these things coming to light, her friends and family held fast to the faith of her safe return. I loved seeing all of the pictures and videos of them still gathering and making things and getting support groups and search parties months and even years after this had happened. Now, there was a $10,000 reward for any tips to bring her home, and that quickly jumped to $30,000, and her flyers were seen all the way to Santa Cruz. Investigators gave up hope on having Antolin slip up and help find Sierra's body or her whereabouts, so on May 21st, they ended up arresting him for the kidnapping and murder of Sierra Lamar. Now, convicting someone of murder without a body is very, very difficult to do. A body is a key piece of evidence in any murder trial. It will pretty much tell you the cause and manner of death, most likely, the timing that it happened, and it kind of wraps around the whole case. It is rare, but it does happen. Like, for example, the case of Lyle Stanford Herring was found guilty of second-degree murder of his wife who went missing for 4 years. And then there's Hector Velaz, was also charged with killing his wife Sandra Velasco. Both cases took place in California and both had no body. And in the time of making this video, there is an active case for missing Colorado woman Suzanne Morphew. Her husband is prime suspect for the disappearance and murder of her, even though her body is yet to be discovered. And I can even mention the Chula Vista mom that went missing earlier in 2021, Maya Millette. Her husband is actually being charged with her disappearance and murder without a body as well. As the detectives were dissecting Antolin's profile and case against the disappearance of Sierra, they remembered some events that took place in Morgan Hill a few years back in 2009 at 2 local Safeway grocery stores. On the left is a composite sketch of the perpetrator, and of course there's Antolin on the right. Now there is a resemblance for sure. And guess who worked at both Safeways while these incidents happened? So there were 3 incidents on 3 separate occasions. The first incident happened at 11 o'clock at night, and it was on March 19th. What happened was the lady was going to her car and noticed a man following her. She quickly got in her car and locked the doors, and then she was able to get away, but still reported it. Since the perpetrator was not successful nor satisfied, 25 minutes later that same night, he went to the other Safeway parking lot, ended up getting in the backseat of the car of a woman that got into hers, punched her from behind, shocked her several times with his stun gun, but then he fled when other people heard the commotion and went to her assistance. What I thought was interesting about the timing of this is this happened on March 19th, 2009. Sierra went missing only a few days difference 3 years later. Now, not even a week goes by, and then he tries again at another Safeway. He's probably thinking, 3rd time's a charm. Now, this third attack, this lady had a knife in her car, so she quickly grabbed it, but the man took her arm, turned it around, and put the knife towards her neck. Well, she started screaming, and others around her were alerted, so then the guy let her go and started running again. As investigators looked into these incidents, they realized Antolin worked as an employee stocking the shelves at both locations the same times the attacks happened. By the way, remember the one with the stun gun incident? Well, I forgot to mention that he had dropped the stun gun, so they processed it and there was a partial fingerprint on the battery inside of it. Well, they compared it to Antolin Garcia Torres's prints, and it was a match. The district attorney's office wanted to take the kidnapping and murder of Sierra Lamar plus the kidnapping and carjackings that took place in 2009 all to court in one trial together. Now, just a side note, as I was getting a picture for this time in the video for the district attorney's office of Santa Clara County, their cover photo is still the trial of Sierra Lamar. They still hold fast this case in 2021, and I love that. The official charges were filed on February 11th, 2014, and Antolin pled not guilty 2 days later. The following May, the prosecuting team stated they wanted to go all the way for the death penalty. Now, if he did get death penalty on this case, he'll be the first one in Santa Clara County that had no body since 1989. Even though Antolin was arrested, people never stopped looking for Sierra. Search teams gathered here and there for years until about March of 2015. The Help Find Sierra Lamar Facebook group posted that they were going to suspend the searches on her 3-year anniversary. Let's jump to January 2017. Antolin's trial finally began in court. The prosecuting side showed evidence that Antolin had abducted, raped, and murdered Sierra Mae Lamar on March 16, 2012. They didn't forget to implement the 3 separate attacks on the women at Safeway stores in Morgan Hill years prior. Speaking of Safeway, the prosecutors believe that Antolin had possibly seen and stalked Sierra after seeing her at Safeway while she was shopping with her mom. That he got to know her, where she lived, by following her home possibly, and saw that she walked alone to the bus stop every day. Antolin had about a 5 to 15 minute window from his house to Sierra's. Okay, so this is a video I took on my phone, and that's where Antolin would have lived. He would have taken a right out of the RV park onto Monterey, which is actually one of the main structure roads in Morgan Hill. There's a couple ways he could have gotten to her house. Now, you see West Dunn Avenue crossing Monterey. That's another major road. That's actually, if you made a left there, that's where I would have gone and lived. But he could have taken Dunn to Peak onto Main and then gone to Hale. If you can see clearly, he could have made a couple turns in the back roads, or he could have just continued on Monterey. Either way, it would have paralleled. The main road on the left is Hale, and Hale just parallels all the way up to northern Morgan Hill where Sierra lived. Now, if he took Hale, he would have made a right onto Palm and then a left onto Doherty and would have met her perfectly towards her bus stop. But he could have taken Monterey, made a left onto Palm, and then a right onto Doherty. Either way, it's a straight shot, not hard. The investigators thought maybe there was a 5 to 15 minute window, but it only takes a few seconds to commit a crime. It doesn't even take a minute, so that definitely set the scenario. I think about Sierra in this moment and wonder, did she even know what was going to happen? Was she on her phone? Was she listening to music? Was she rapping to her music like she liked to? Did she think about her cheerleading and her friends and what she was going to do later that day? And it's all just so surreal. Okay, so let's circle back to her case. In the trial, they explained they believed Antolin had abducted Sierra and bound her with rope and placed her in his trunk, where he took her to another location. No one will really know the order of assault on Sierra, whether he sexually assaulted her in his car or elsewhere, or if she was alive or not. They believed that Antolin was the cause of her disappearance and death, and also for the 3 attacks on the women at the Safeways. Now, the defense didn't really have any good plausible reasons why Sierra's DNA was in his car, especially the hair on the rope in his trunk. However, they did try to argue the fingerprint that was on the battery in the stun gun. The defense tried to say that Antolin was stocking the items back on the shelf since they were returned and he had to put them back together. But a Safeway store manager actually took the stand, and this person had worked there with the same time Antolin had worked there as well. He explained items and products that were returned were not reshelved. He checked the store records, and that stated a new policy started that they could reshelf returned items, but that happened after the attacks happened. Antolin's family testified in his behalf, saying he grew up in an unhealthy, unfortunate state that stemmed from abuse, neglect, poverty, and even mentioned incest. They talked a lot about his father and how he was very abusive physically and an alcoholic. An interesting fact about his father. So 6 months after Sierra went missing in September 2012, Antolin's father, Genaro Garcia Fernandez, was convicted of 17 freaking accounts of child molestation and is in prison for sexually molesting a female family member. It started at the innocent age of 7 for this girl and all the way up to 14 years old. And if that's not disgusting enough, he even had the nerve to say on trial that she wasn't even a virgin. Well, you know what they say, the apple clearly doesn't fall far from the tree.
No cameras were allowed inside the courtroom as Laura Torres cried at the witness stand, recounting her husband's abuse when her children were little and even when she was pregnant with Antolin Garcia Torres. The defense is trying to gain sympathy from the jurors as they paint a picture of a troubled childhood with abuse and neglect.
As much as Antolin's family got to speak for him, Sierra's family and friends got to speak for her. They showed pictures and videos of her growing up and how fun she was. They showed everyone how much she just loved life and how she just had a compliment to this world. Mind you, Antolin looked away during all of that. After years of grief, 5 months of trial, and 2 days of jury deliberations, they found Antolin Garcia Torres guilty on all accounts. That included the kidnapping and murder of Sierra May Lamar, and also guilty for the attempted kidnapping and carjackings of the 3 victims at the Safeway parking lots. Sierra's family was glad he was found guilty, of course. However, they were disappointed he didn't get the death penalty.
He'll be able to live, Sierra won't. He'll be able to breathe, Sierra doesn't. His family doesn't grieve, we'll grieve for the rest of our lives.
Antolin did get life in prison without the possibility of parole, and he will be serving the rest of his life at the Cocoron State Prison, which is in the eastern part of Central California. Sierra's family never had an actual funeral for her because they didn't feel right without her body. 2014 would have been Sierra's graduation year, so in honor of her, Ann Sobrato High School in Morgan Hill put a chair out for her during their graduation. Her previous school, Washington High in Fremont, also did something sweet. They made a roundabout bench around a tree that had a placard that read, "Sit here with me quietly. You'll never be alone. We wait to see you smile again and have our husky home." They also had a really nice balloon release with her former cheerleading squad. Okay, let's fast forward a few years. So, a lot of prisoners just in general will get either fan mail or mail from reporters just questioning certain things on stories, and he never usually wrote back until now. A woman named Amy Larson asked him 4 questions, and he relented and responded to answering one of the 4 questions. And the question was very simple. Do you maintain your innocence? He responded, "Yes, Amy, I hold fast to my innocence." He just wanted to do his time quietly and doesn't like to talk about Sierra's case. So far, he still hasn't told anyone where her body is. As I humbly conclude this tragic story about Sierra Lamar, thank you so much for sticking around. Please keep the Lamar family in your thoughts and prayers. I'll also be leaving the Sheriff's Department for Santa Clara County tip line if you have any information to help with Sierra's case. And to Sierra, rest in peace, Angel. Fly high.
This is a call that I know that we've fallen off the track, and somehow we had to let go. And now I need to get you back, 'cause I know there's a light space, a gleaming trace, and I won't let me go on like this. I won't give up, I won't back down, and I won't stop until I find, until I find you. I know I've gotta find a way, just like I knew you were gonna come my way in every breath. ghost of that dream. I will, 'cause I choose to believe.